fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello and welcome to the Salt Strong live stream and podcast. My name is Rich Natoli. I am your normal host of this show, and I'm joined as always by the lovely and talented Ed Gobo. Ed, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, Rich. Happy to be on again. We got a pretty awesome guest lined up for tonight, so I think we're going to have a good time with this one.
Yeah, I agree. We have on tonight for a guest somebody that especially if you are into any online content, which most people here would be, anything related to fishing in general, you've seen him. We have Joe Cermele coming on, and we can go through the list. I can't even go through the entire list of everything that he's done. You look at field and stream saltwater sportsmen. Meat Eaters is where I really, really learned a lot about him. And he's got his new podcast, Cut and Retie podcast. So he's got a lot to share and a lot to share about the Mid-Atlantic. And we're going to talk about spring fishing just in general. And it's a live stream, so if you guys have any questions at any time, just make sure you put it in the chat, and we'll try to get to it. Ed's going to do his best to keep up with those. And
I try.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get them. This is going to be a fun one because we don't really have much fishing to talk about lately in our area personally. I'm just going to share with everyone, even though Ed doesn't want me to. Ed can't even get his kayak out of his garage right now. So nope. He's been land-based and stuck. And I have not, it's all weather windows right now. We've got this nor'easter coming in tonight. We're going to have winds up to 50 miles an hour. And I'm 91 miles inshore. And our forecast is for 54 mile per hour gusts. I don't even know, Ed, what you guys are looking at down there, but
it's probably
going to be brutal. Batten down the hatches. If your boat's facing the wrong direction, get it out. It's going to be a bad one. So this is going to be a welcome conversation to get us through the week for a lot of us in the Mid-Atlantic and all the way up through the Northeast. So the only thing that I don't know, you would think that I would have checked by now. When I check the forecast, I look for weather windows for fishing, right? So it doesn't really matter what the temperature is. I'm just looking at the wind. And I saw the wind, but I don't know if it's supposed to rain or if it's supposed to snow. So I guess that'll be my surprise tomorrow because I'm sure I'll forget to check after we're done. So Ed, do you know?
South Jersey ain't getting any snow. I got a snowblower this year, so we're good.
We're all safe. We're all good. That's awesome. All right. So Ed, is there anything you want to go over before we bring our guest on, or do you just want to?
No, I think we should jump right into it and not waste time, I guess.
All right. So with that, everyone, let's welcome to the stream, Joe Cermele. Joe, welcome. Good to see you.
What's up, guys? How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Good, man. Thanks for coming on.
I'm really excited to have you come on. I have been following Cut and Retie, not since the first day though. It took a few weeks for me to find it, and I'm a big fan of it. I was a fan of yours with some of your other productions in the past. I can't remember which one it was, but which one was the one where you kind of changed it up? You changed up the format.
The Bent podcast?
Yeah, Bent podcast.
Bent was the podcast when I was still with Meat Eater. Yeah, that was a very fast-paced show that came off more like a 90s radio show than a traditional podcast. So,
and that's probably why I liked it. Yeah.
But the new show, Cut and Retie, is sort of a blend of more like what you guys do and just have conversations with a little bit of that segmentation peppered in, but not quite so fast-paced. That I'm very proud of Bent, but man, to put something that massive together week over week was a grind. Like it was a lot of work to do that.
Yeah, there was a lot of production work that went into that, and you could tell. Yeah. That is something that Ed and I have talked about in the past. What's our vision? What do we want it to look like? And we settled on it needs to have good production value, but it doesn't. We can't go too far with it. So as long as we treat it seriously and we have serious guests on that, have fun, but are going to talk about fishing, we're going to be good. Yeah. And I couldn't do anything like you were doing with some of your previous things.
It's funny because I agree with you entirely. And I've said this for years. I think people in general put so much value on production value nowadays, whether it's video or, you look at like the fly fishing film tour and all these different things. And that's great, if you can do it well. But I'm a firm believer that story trumps all. So you don't have to have this insanely good production value if you're engaging with an audience. Though I will say, I think it's a little more important in podcasting, because there are some out there, I'm sure you guys have listened to some too, where it's like it's hard, it can be hard to listen to sometimes.
It's cringy.
There's so much good technology now, both online, whether you have mics or a studio or just subscribe to a service, that it's pretty easy to make a very listenable podcast nowadays. But every once in a while, you still come across a few where it's like, okay, it's a little scratchy, a little staticky,
Yes, 100%. And we've worked to do that. We still do, for those that aren't aware, I don't just take the audio from this and just throw it in a podcast. It's actually some significant editing that goes into there. And I am happy to say, Ed, most of the editing is on myself, with my and
well, that's good, because when we first started, it was me like clicking and making all kinds of weird noises and dropping things, and so I'm glad it's not me anymore.
It's a learning process for anybody who wants to do this stuff. The first podcast I did was the Hookshots podcast at Field and Stream. I had no idea what I was doing, and then I realized later after Meat Eater that I really had no idea what I was doing, and I got to work with a great sound engineer there. So when I started Cut and Retie, I was like, I will find the budget for a good one of those. Like, I am completely uninterested in cutting audio anymore. Cutting video is still very fun. I am not a fan of cutting audio. Don't love it.
Yeah, I kind of cheat the way that I do it. I don't.
It's good.
We'll just leave it. We'll just leave
smarter,
it at
not harder. Yeah.
Right. I get it done quickly, and I get it done at a good production value. But I'm not checking levels, and I'm not doing all that stuff. Yeah. It's beyond me. So yeah. I'm a fisherman. That's what I do. I fish.
Throw some compression on it. Call it good. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's dive in. So your background. Let's just, if we could do just a 1 minute background, just so that everybody who's not familiar with your name is going to be familiar with you once you go through it. But maybe you could just give a little bit of background, and then we could dive in and let's just talk spring fishing.
Sure. Yeah. I'll just run through some of the places I've been. Maybe people have seen me at one or more of them, but, I've been full time in outdoor media since I graduated college in 2005, started with, New Jersey Angler magazine, which Ed probably remembers as a Jersey guy, back in the day. Mm-hmm. From there to Saltwater Sportsman for a few years, to Field and Stream, where I became the fishing editor. I was the youngest fishing editor in the history of that magazine, and, did that for 10 years. And even had a couple years pulling double duty as the fishing editor of Outdoor Life tacked onto that. From there to Meat Eater, and now after all these years, I've started my own little media company, and I'm doing my own thing now. So it's been pretty cool, quite a wild ride, and one that I don't take for granted. I still am like, I can't believe that I've managed to do this for almost 20 years now, but somehow I have. So.
It's funny because you mentioned that, and I'm thinking, how the heck did he manage to do that? I went to school for the wrong stuff.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I went to school for journalism, and it's one of those things that I almost hate to say this, but I mean it's true. Like, to be transparent about it, I look back on what I learned in my journalism and multimedia courses in college, and again, I graduated in 2005. And then I got thrown into the real magazine world, and very little of that seemed to apply. And especially on the multimedia side, within 2 years, it's like nobody even uses those programs to lay out a magazine anymore. Nobody even uses that program to cut video anymore. So, people have been like, well, did you ever think about going back to get your master's in journalism? I'm like, what for? Like right. This is one of those fields where you learn as you go. You know what I mean? It's on the ground. Getting thrown into a lot of fires and failing a lot is sort of how you come up in this game, and I've been very lucky to get my foots in the right doors at the right times and meet some great people. It was a lot of hard work, but there's certainly an element of good timing in it. I always compare it to playing in a band. It's like a lot of success, if that's what you want to do, is meeting that one right person or getting your foot in that one right door at the exact right time. So, and I'm blessed for all that. Like I said, I'll know when I'm done when I wake up and take this for granted, which I don't. I still can't believe that I've managed to pull it off, and I'm so grateful for it.
That's awesome.
I'd say you pulled it off
for sure.
So far, so good, but we'll see. Yeah, in the podcast game and everything, you're only as good as you were last month. You know what I mean? So, I
do really enjoy the cut and retie.
Thank you.
Who was it that you had on? You were talking about the crappy golfing.
Oh yeah, that was just last week. I had my uncle Bud Woolley, who actually lives not too far from you, down in Northfield, and. He bought a lure company. I mean, I was very young. I was probably 12 or 13, but to make a long story short, without retelling the whole podcast, he bought a bass lure company, a well-established bass lure company. And, what he thought was going to be the dream, quitting his day job and going all in on bass lures turned out to be much more of a struggle than he had anticipated. But I was very young when it was all happening in real time. So all these years later, it was kind of interesting to sit down and be like, Uncle Bud, tell me what was really going on back then. And it was a bit of a cautionary tale. And I did it because I feel like now with social media more than ever before, if you are a maker of lures or rods or custom whatever, it's easier than ever to get your name out there, which is a good thing. It's easier to get your work seen. But it just seems like there's so many of these companies and little lure companies, things that pop up. And here's a guy that really went all in. I mean, he put his life savings at the shot of being a lure manufacturer. And there were some lessons in there. And, I really cut and retie about having a good time. I consider myself like an entertainer more than like a fishing expert. That's not really what I do. I'm not really about hardcore fishing advice. That certainly gets weaved in. But every once in a while, I sort of like that, for lack of a better way to put it, like show a little bit of the dirty side of fishing that maybe people don't think about, the behind the scenes of the lure business and how cutthroat that can be. So I'll never miss a chance to sort of shed light on an aspect of this that maybe you don't see or hear about too much,
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that up because that podcast was like, I'm listening to it. I'm like, holy crap. I am right in the middle of a lot of this stuff that your uncle was talking about. I'm like,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So this is how it actually is. It's not just me.
Yeah, and I certainly, didn't. I even said in there, I didn't do that to be discouraging necessarily. But if that is you, if you do have a small lure business and you're thinking of growing that, I think the lesson with that podcast was thinking about sort of, what is your happiness? Is your goal to be in Bass Pro? Or are you okay making side money, selling locally, being locally famous in the jig scene or whatever it may be? He had gone all in. So he kind of tried to start at the top. And I think that's a lot different than starting off small and growing. But it was interesting feedback from a lot of people like you. There's a lot of people who are like, man, thanks for that. Like I'm sort of grappling with that now. Like, where do I take this lure business that I have or this rod business that I have? And there were definitely some good pointers and stuff to think about from that.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good points. Ed and I talk about this stuff all the time, and I keep asking him questions to test him on where his vision is.
Yeah,
Captain Hanks. So I wasn't always doing fishing for a career. I was actually in business and working in offices for my entire career until last year, and I had to make a plan and very clearly make my goals. I started a YouTube channel with the goal of getting to work for Salt Strong, which I'm now there. And I keep telling Ed, I think I told him this today, make your plan and then you decide whether you're going to execute it or not. Put your vision, how can you get there? And then you make your decision. And you don't even have to do it. If you decide you're not going all in, then it's probably the best idea for you, the best decision.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes sometimes. And to the earlier conversation, I went to college to be an elementary school teacher.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and then I went into finance.
Yeah.
I love you, Rich, but I would not let you around my children.
That's terrible.
It's funny though. I mean, I went to school for journalism because I like to write, but I did not go into school going, and I'm going to write it. I'm going to write for fishing magazines. That was sort of like a junior year. Like, this is almost over. You got to kind of try and pursue something, think about what you're going to do with this. I didn't want to go into newspapers or anything. So even to the bitter end, that was sort of a spur of the moment decision that just sort of worked out. And I got lucky because at the time, there weren't any 21-year-old kids really clamoring to get into the saltwater sportsmen's and the New Jersey Angler. So I was kind of the oddball. That has very much changed now in 2023. You know, everybody wants to be a writer now. Everybody's a blogger. Everybody, you know, so the landscape has changed. But I will say, Ed, while we're talking about it, you will have at least one customer in me because of this, I scoped your jigs. And your tog jigs with the offset hook, fantastic. That's dirty, and I will be using them this season. So very good stuff.
You'll like it. We'll talk more about them off camera.
Yeah, we'll work something out.
We'll set you up.
My personal favorite as well. Yeah. So, all right. So let's dive into a little bit of fishing. So you do I'm going to guess, unless you're doing something for work, quote unquote work, you're going to be fishing Jersey Shore. So New Jersey fishing, maybe Maryland, a little bit of New York, but is that typically where you're staying?
Yeah. I mean, Maryland, not so much as I should. And I say that because presently there are some friends of mine who are like, there's some things going on in Maryland. And like, now I'm the 40-year-old guy with 2 kids. It's like, dude, I can't go to Maryland on a Tuesday night. I'll be exhausted tomorrow, you know, but I don't get down there as much as I should. Though I plan to this year because of my podcast, I've made some friends down there in the snakehead game, snakehead lures. So I will be down there more. But no, I'm primarily Pennsylvania, New Jersey, salt and freshwater. I mean, I'm only 50 minutes from the ocean. Man, I do everything. I might be up in the Catskills, fly fishing, up in Northeast PA, fly fishing for trout, or throwing stick baits for trout. I'm sort of all over the place, you know what I mean? And that's why I like living around here. I catch a lot of flack for Jersey. That's real outdoorsy. I'm like, yeah, you're not thinking about the variety, and that's sort of what I love around here is the variety of fishing that we have.
I think a lot of people don't truly understand, and I'm not from New Jersey, but that's where I do most of my fishing. I don't think people really understand the diversity of that entire state. You've got, Raritan Bay is world-class striped bass fishing.
100%, yeah.
And that's not all, but that's what it's known for. You have, offshore, we have an incredible reef system out there for flounder, for black sea bass, for a lot of species. We got the mahi that are sitting out of the lobster pots.
That's one of my favorite things in the entire world. Yeah,
love pot hopping for mahi. Just give me a spinning rod or a fly rod, and I'm happy.
Yep.
Although I haven't caught one on the fly in probably 15, 20 years, but
I don't catch as many as I used to because back in the day I'd go with sort of smaller crews, and now inevitably I end up out there with a bunch more people. So it's always this game where it's like, can we give the fly guy the first shot? And everybody's like, yeah. We want to see you stick one on fly. And like you get that cast and move one or see one and everybody's just boom, right over your head. So like to do, which I don't blame anybody for that. But I feel like, the best way to do it on fly, it's like you go with one guy and the mission is you're going to fly cast, I'm going to drive, and then we're going to switch. But I always end up, out there with a group, and then I'm like the guy in the way, false cast in and catching the outriggers and all that stuff. But
yeah, it's still fun though.
Oh yeah, it's still fun. But
you just got to hurry up before everyone gets
exactly.
Yeah, or you go last after everybody brings one in, then you get the next pot.
Yep.
But we have, and then if you even look inshore, southern New Jersey, so think Atlantic County and south, has a marsh system that is absolutely amazing, where you can catch everything back there, literally every inshore species. You can catch bluefish, weakfish, striped bass. You can even catch speckled trout. You can even catch redfish from time to time, sheep's head, tog. It's all right there. And I like that because I do most of my fishing from a kayak. And while we can go offshore and we do go out in the bays, it's nice to be able to launch, in the backwaters and hit everything that I want to hit and still be, a reasonable pedal from getting back to the ramp. So I absolutely love New Jersey, and I really love Maryland too, I have to say. Chesapeake Bay especially is just outrageous. And I wish that I could get down there this week. The wind's going to blow us out, but the fish that are coming in right now are crazy.
Well, it's funny because the overriding topic of this show is spring fishing. And then you guys are doing your intro. I don't do a lot of live. I'm always like stacking podcasts. So it's hard to like talk about weather because by the time you hear it, the weather happened 2 weeks ago. Yeah. But now you're in real time and you guys are talking about this nor'easter that's coming. And man, that's kind of why I hate the month of March. I'm like, oh, it's spring. Bang, like here comes the monkey wrench. So like I'm bracing for it too, and I'm like, oh, what's it going to do to this? How much is it going to slow down this run? So yeah, not excited about it. Well,
especially after February, because February it was just dead calm.
Yeah,
but you can't fish in beautiful weather, nice and warm. The water temperatures are up, and then March hits. Striped bass opens in the backwaters, and I think the average gust level for the last week was like 32 miles per. I calculated it earlier, actually in the weekend. I think it was 32 mile per hour gusts on average. Every day in New Jersey, and I think I used Atlantic City. That's crazy.
I despise the months of March and September. September is like one of those weird months to me where like it's like transitioning, so that can be difficult fishing. But yeah, oh man, March is a bear. I just want it to be over. Just give me April 1 already.
Yep, I'm in the same boat. Everybody's asking me, when are you going fishing? I'm like, dude, I haven't even thought about it. I don't start getting into it till April.
Well, I've been thinking about it. Matter of fact, I'm supposed to leave this week to go walleye fish on Lake Erie. And that's looking a little in limbo for the same reason, because it was nice, and then it's going to blow 45 for 4 days. So we'll see,
And I just have striped bass on my head right now. That's what I'm focused on. That's what I can't wait to hit. And, we're at the point now where I went yesterday with one of the insider members for Salt Strong, Tad Drummond. And we got there and I was like, look, this is not going to be a good day. It's going to be really hard. It just rained. The temperatures dropped. I don't know what direction this wind is coming from, but it wasn't forecasted here. And he just looked at me. He's like, yep, but we get to go on the water. Yeah. And that's what we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we found the fish. Our screens were lit up and we could not buy a bite. But that's because you get that cold snap and it hits the upper 20s at night and it just shuts it down.
I forget which podcast I think it was somebody else's podcast. We were talking about that, how amazing it is. Like you can go out this time of year and that water's 47 or 48 and just nothing is happening despite how lit that screen is. And at 2:00 it goes 49 and then just bang, like how hair trigger, how minimal it can be this time of year sometimes.
Mm-hmm. What's funny is we waited that out because it was supposed to get sunny. And what we did is we went back towards the sounds. So we're like, let's find where it's going to warm up. And we were there and the sun came out and it was glorious. And then it disappeared 20 minutes later. We're looking at the temperatures. It went up like 0.1 degrees and then it started dropping. We're like, we're out of here.
It's like the perfect storm when they break through the clouds for a second and see the sunshine. Yeah.
I could hear angels singing and it turned into death metal right after that. I was like, no, that's the cue to go back. So we just had it right back. And it was a good day on the water, but it was tough. So are you going to go out for striped bass at all?
Oh yeah, I already have some Raritan Bay stuff on the books, though not till early April. See, my thing this time of year, like the thing I jones for, my first thing, because I live right on the Delaware River, is the migratory runs of shad and stripers that come right up the river here to Trenton and beyond. Right. So, like, you talk about spring fishing, that stuff is my kickoff. As much as I look forward to getting down to the saltwater and doing it, when in my opinion, like when you live on a coastal river that experiences any kind of run of anadromous fish from salt to fresh, that's such a special thing. And, a lot of people in the country can't experience that, right? Because they don't have these coastal rivers. So to live on the Delaware, where it is this essentially, it's freezing cold all winter, there's nothing going on, and just gets this surge, this injection of life at that 50-degree mark. It's one of my favorite things in the world, and it makes it hard for me to travel late March, into early April for that alone, because it's such a fleeting window. But that is often where I catch my first striper of the year, is just on the river right down the street here. And I don't know if you guys spend any time, doing river bass or migratory bass. They might not be as big on average as what you'll catch in the salt. but man, did they rip. Like in a spring flow, a river bass that pummels a plug, like you are going for a ride. I swear they fight so much harder. So I look forward to that a lot.
They do. I'm sure you got, well, actually, I'm not sure. I know for a fact you were in on the November, the last fall run.
Oh, and this fall was, I mean, I don't even need to say it. I mean, I'm not the only one who was like, that's the best deal we've seen in 20 years. And you know what? I didn't get in on it as much as I wanted to, but I got down just enough, and I did manage to get one of those days. I'll never forget it. And it's just been so long since I'd seen anything like that, where you just come up over the dune, and the action was so good everywhere that there wasn't even anybody there, because they didn't have to be. It didn't matter where you were. Like, this was in a 5-mile span of beach. So I come up over the dune and I look left and look right, and I don't see any fishermen. And I'm like, well, I'm in the wrong place. And then just like trained my eyes on, I had striped bass running into my boots on the bar. I mean, I walked out to the bar and they are blowing bait behind me. A few times I threw behind. I'm ridiculous, just absolutely ridiculous.
It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy.
Yep.
But I had on video that I did a video on one of the trips that I went on, and the biggest fish of the day didn't even take any line. Mm-hmm. But it was I think the ones that were in the 23 to 28 inch. Yeah. Were really ripping it. And I guess the best fights were the 28 to 36 size. They were just tearing it up. But once you got to 40 and over, you get you get heavy weight, and they just kind of like lock themselves in.
Well, that's sort of a funny misconception that I think ties to a lot of fish. Everybody wants the biggest and the baddest. But in terms of sporting capabilities, I totally agree. I mean, we had, as great as that surf run was this year, I mean, the amount of big bass we caught just offshore, ridiculous. I hadn't caught that many fish over 40 pounds in a season since like 2011. Now, granted, I was younger then with no kids, so that's also, you have to factor in going less than you did back then, right? You have to factor that in. But still, you have somebody from out of town come in, as we did a few times this season, and it's like, they want that 40-plus pounder, and that first run is a ripper, and maybe you get one more. But pound for pound, like if you really want to battle fish, slot-size fish in that 24 to 32, those are the scrappers. Those are the ones that don't stop. You get a couple good runs out of those big girls, and I love them dearly. But they're not as hard fighting as a fish as the smaller ones.
Yep. They're not. I'm from the same school of thought as you are. I'll go fish the Mullica River before I go out for the bigger ones, because I'd rather catch the little ones. Yeah, they're more fun.
Yeah.
Mm. I have a lot of fun with them. We have to bring up this first question because there's a follow-up that I want to get your comment on. Any tips on stripers? So I know you don't bill yourself as the expert, but what's one tip that you would give to viewers or listeners on something that you found that works on springtime striped bass?
Wow, man, that is Charles. That is really putting me on the spot. See, my head automatically goes to, because I get so many questions through my channels, and if that came like to my DMs, my follow up would be like, well, how do you want to catch them, man? What are we talking? Fly? Are we offshore? Are we surf fishing? What is it that you want to do? Man,
I'll fill that in. I'll fill that in for you. Anything. Just any tip that you would give.
So I don't know how much of a tip this is, but it'll play into something that I've come to really enjoy. I'm sure, as you guys know, the giant spoon craze that has taken over lately. So in the last few years, these giant flutter spoons that were originally designed for largemouth bass, they came out of the Midwest, have been adopted by striper guys. And at first I was sort of lukewarm to those. And in the last 2 years, I got really into fishing those. And what I have found with those lures is that, at least for me, they don't catch a ton of small fish, but when one gets thumped, it's the one you want. So I don't know if you'd call that a tip, but sort of if you're out this spring and you're marking fish, or there's a lot of schoolie fish around, and you're really looking to upsize and catch you a 20-pounder or better, I've found a few times last year that if I just made the effort to stick with that spoon, despite what everybody else was catching on shads or smaller metals or whatever it may be, maybe they had the numbers, but if you stick with that spoon, you'd pull the 20-pounder among the 12-pounders. So it's kind of just a good thing to, I think, have in your arsenal for that reason. You know what I mean? It might not be a numbers lure, but I think it's a tremendous big fish lure.
I think that's a great tip. You know, there are days that you go out and you just get exhausted on the mid-sized ones, and you're like, look, I got one more fish in me. And, believe it or not, it was so prolific of a season that people were leaving the fish blitzing.
Oh yeah.
Just walking away.
Oh yeah.
Saying, I just can't do it anymore. And I don't know how I'm going to, shift the car when I get in there.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that was like George. His hands are all beat up, tore up.
Right. Yeah, we had a guy, George Bucci, on. He does a lot of surf fishing. You may have heard of George, but
I know the name for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I figured same area. And he's got something on his hand. It's deformed now from all the striped bass that he caught, but he couldn't stop. But he did leave them. He couldn't end the season until the season ended, until they were gone. But he kept going, but his hand didn't look right. it didn't look good.
I believe it. I mean, a couple of those nights I had in the surf, the one in particular, I mean, you're out there by yourself. The sun goes down. You're dealing with a headlamp, trying to turn away so you don't scare anything. The thing's got 3 treble hooks in it. The waves are, I got ripped up, and I didn't do it nearly as much as George did last season. So
yeah, George was all over.
Yeah.
Now, there is one other bit of advice. I want your comment on this advice for a striper tip. I mean, you might have some inside information. Soaking chunks with anise from Dexter.
Dexter.
What's your thought on that?
I've heard that's a thing that the old timers were into, and I'll just say that legend has it that catches a lot of huge stripers. But you have to soak it for a really long time, like at least 12 hours to a soak for the anise to really sort of penetrate and call them in. Yeah.
Yeah, the word on the street is that you were involved in some of those historic blitzes that the Garbage Man has shared.
Oh no, I wouldn't say that. They were way, but he's much older than me, fellas. Come on, that was way before my time. I just happened to rub elbows with him time to time and absorb his wisdom and his old stories, shall we say. If any of my people happen to be tuning in, he might have ended up live where I'm sitting right now in an episode coming up. I might have actually had him sit down in my studio, but I mean,
how much did it cost you?
I can't disclose that. I also had to beef up security at his request. I can't disclose numbers, but he's a legend. What can I say? I've idolized that guy since I was a little kid. We'll leave it at that.
I just love that guy.
That makes 2 of us.
Yeah.
Ed's like, we got to get him on. This is like the first time I asked him.
It'll cost you, Ed, but I might be able to arrange it, and I'll take a middleman fee.
Hey, it'd be worth it. It'd be worth it.
The first time Ed and I had a discussion way back about doing the live streams, it was when it was on my channel. I said, well, who do you think we should have on? He's like, easy. Bob the Garbage Man. I'm like, how are we going to get Bob the Garbage Man to come on? We tried.
You could get him. It's do you want him? Because once you commit, it's like, can you handle it? Believe me. Yeah.
I don't know if we can or not.
I don't know on the new platform we could. I think on the old platform we might have been able to get away with it, but
yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. All right. So I just had to bring that up in there. So when you're all right, so you're going to head up to Lake Erie. Going to go in on the walleye. Is that your favorite fish to go for in the spring?
Walleye?
Yeah.
No. I can't. Rich, I can't tell if you're teasing or not because you know my history of making fun of walleye. I'm not a walleye guy.
I know your history.
Good. Okay, good. We got that out on the table. No, walleye, not my favorite fish, but I always have to follow that up, and I'm adamant about following it up with. That does not mean that I don't respect the fish or the guys who are extremely good at doing it. I've seen it. I've been out there, and even though it's maybe not my cup of tea, it's not. I don't gravitate to it as something I would see myself doing on my own. I appreciate the culture behind walleyes. I understand what they mean to the Great Lakes shoreline and elsewhere, to the economy, to the people that grew up with them, and have the utmost respect for what a really good walleye fisherman is capable of. And it's funny because I'm not a big walleye dude, but we'll just say that somehow I find myself thrust back into it at least once a year. I end up out there for a different project or something. And I enjoy it when I go. I would rather go out there to sort of the Mecca, with the guys who are really dialed and have that shot. I mean, the biggest walleye I ever caught came out of Lake Erie. It was 13 and a half pounds or something. I have it mounted because I figure I'll probably never do that again at the time. And so far I haven't. But in the meantime, there's a walleye run, right down the road from here in the river right now.
Yeah.
I stink at it. I can't catch them. You could tell me exactly where to go. I will go and I will blank. And I can't really get into the local walleye thing. But again, because I just have such an appreciation for the different cultures, I'll never pass on the chance to go do it on Erie. I mean, if walleye are your thing, that's your Montauk. You know what I mean? That is a place you have to fish before you go, right. It is incredible out there. It really is.
I did a lot of walleye fishing in college, and me and my one buddy, maybe this is why I didn't do so good in college. We would schedule classes so that we could go fishing. Mm-hmm. And we once took a volleyball class in the summer just so that we had to stay up at school.
Yeah.
And we fished every day. We did volleyball once a week. It was one day a week class. And we were trying to learn walleye fishing, and I just couldn't get it. Yeah. It was great when you caught one and when it just clicked, but then it would unclick for me. It just never clicked. It's so not like what I normally do.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it.
And I mean, I'm almost talking out of school here because not only, yes, we do have walleyes here, but to say there's a walleye scene here the way there is in the Midwest, there's just not, right? They're just not our fish. But that's what I see without specifics. Suffice it to say, there are specific spots that are very well known. Everybody around here knows them in the wintertime. And a friend of mine will go there and then send me pictures. He's like, I got 14 tonight. I got 6 tonight. Dude, I have never caught one in any, never. I've never caught one in any of these spots. And the only thing that I know about these walleyes is it's all timing. I know I'm not throwing the wrong thing. I know I'm not doing the wrong thing. I'm not doing anything different than anybody else. I just can't seem to be there when they decide that they want to eat. And I get frustrated and therefore don't go enough to finally hit that window where they are. I'll pop in a couple times a winter and I'm like, this isn't happening again. I'm freezing cold. I'm 20 minutes of throwing in the same hole and I'm out. But I've caught some giant local walleyes in the 8 to 10 pound range over the years, but all throwing striper plugs. They're hitting SP minnows, in May randomly. And that's cool. But ask me how to find that fish here. Couldn't tell you. Don't know where that fish is, except for when they're in the wintering holes.
So we're not so much a walleye podcast, but I do have 2 questions that came in I think are worth noting here. So John, he says he keeps finding weights inside his walleyes. Is that normal?
I don't know. It's around here. I'd say not. I don't know. I can ask my friends in Ohio. I don't think so. Maybe. I don't know. That's a loaded question, John Kern.
And then
I appreciate it though.
Ben from Crabbing and Fishing was asking, can they be targeted in Jersey? Which I think you kind of touched on.
Yeah, and in several places. I mean, there are walleye in lakes in this state. There's plenty of them, if I'm not mistaken, in Apatcong. I know. I think there might be walleye in Spruce Run Reservoir, and I know there's some smaller lakes scattered here and there that have them. But there's actually a pretty healthy stocking program. Pennsylvania, I think contributes to it a little bit more, but it benefits everybody. There's walleyes in the Delaware River from the tide line to the confluence of the branches up in New York. There's a lot of walleyes in the Delaware River.
Good to know.
Yeah, you can keep the walleyes. I'm not going to go for them. Anybody who wants to, Ben, Crabbing and Fishing, if you want to have fun, John, to make sure you save those weights, recycle that lead.
Yeah, at least use them again.
I know a guy that could melt it down and reuse it. So
yeah. So let's talk about, for spring fishing, what, if you could only target one species in the springtime, and let's define not by the season itself, but let's just say March and April, and it's saltwater, what would the species be that you're going to target?
In saltwater, that time of year, I'm purely striper fishing. You know, I like to try and get in on Rare and Bay if I can before it gets so crazy. You know, there's always that little crescendo there when it's like nobody's sure what's going on where yet, and then all of a sudden overnight the place explodes. Yeah. So I enjoy trying to sneak up there a couple times early. In fact, I have some intention of doing that this year because I'm getting a little bit more into kayak fishing than I used to. So I want to get up there and try that. But I also have a couple trips with some captain buddies of mine booked up there. But I mean, between the river and the salt, it's stripers. You know, March and April is striper time.
No tog in April?
You know, I don't. I love tog fishing. And I'll go as much as I can during the winter and fall season. And traditionally, I have not really spent much time doing it in the spring. It's not that I wouldn't. I just feel like, which is crazy because I know the bite can be very good, if not better, sometimes in the spring, despite the limits being lower. That's neither here nor there. It just always seems like, you kind of get in sort of like a pattern with your fishing where like, oh, now it's tuna time. Oh, now it's striper time. Oh, now they're going away. Now it's tog time. Now it's time to just sit home and do nothing for a few months. Oh, it's striper time again. So I just kind of skip over that. I don't have any friends that really do it. All my tog buddies, they're all focused on stripers come spring. And like I said, I spend a lot of time in the river. So it's, I would, like if you're inviting me, Ed, I'd love to go. In fact, I'd love to fish we talked a little bit about the southern reefs that I don't really spend that much time on. I'm mostly fishing Point Pleasant north for tog these days, sometimes out of Barnegat, but I'd love to try it. I just haven't spent any time doing it, really.
I mean, my boat is not a reef boat, but I got a buddy. We might be able to put something together, see what he's got planned for April.
I'm down. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't fish for tog a lot in the spring. And
I don't think I've ever done it in April.
It's just, I mean, I will out of the kayak. See, with the kayak, it's great because you can go out for striped bass and then you can hit local structure for tog.
Yeah.
But I don't tend to take a lot of tog trips in the spring. Maybe that'll change this year. But you say you're more kayak fishing. You have an Old Town Big Water, correct?
I do. Yeah, I've not had it for that long, and so far I've primarily used it in freshwater because I'm big in the snakeheads and bowfins and all that stuff, and it's been great for that. But I want to play with that more in the salt this year. In fact, I'm going to be taking it down in April. You know, you guys were talking about South Jersey. My in-laws have a place in Ocean City, New Jersey, and that is just a playground for that kind of vessel, for a kayak with all that backwater. You had brought that up, Rich, and it blows people's minds. I'm like, it's every bit of South Carolina down there in terms of the vastness and the sod banks and the channels and the places to explore. So that's like sort of one of the things on my list this year is to spend more time doing that and getting further back there and a little bit more buried.
Oh, it's great. Just disappear in the marshes. You don't even have to see another person and you're catching all the fish.
Yeah.
Well, and I also heard you talking on, I forget which podcast it was, On the Water maybe, about the reds.
Yeah.
So I have a pretty good lead on some spots for back bay reds.
That to me, that is one of those silly local checklist things. Like I have no delusions of getting dialed in and like just pounding reds in this state. I just want my one. I don't care how big, like just to sort of check it off. You know what I mean?
I'm the same way. But apparently this source has caught 8.
In how many years? Like one season, or is that like over the course of 15 years?
No, in one season.
Oh, okay. We could commiserate later. I mean, I have some beads on a couple of spots. They're just not places I fish often, but I'm not greedy. I just want my one, just because I love redfish. I mean, I've chased redfish from Texas to South Florida, all across the Gulf to the Carolinas. Redfish are awesome. So to have one here would be amazing. I would love to be able to do it. You know, I know a bunch of people who have caught them, but it's always incidental. We're doing this and, oh, holy smokes, there's a redfish. That's cool. But even that doesn't count as much as like, I want to target and catch one targeted redfish here. So,
yeah. Well, Rich and I, we put in 2 or 3 days
I put in a lot more than that in the summers. When I go alone, I tend to do my fishing video and then go looking for reds or areas that aren't charted well that might hold reds, because I figured if nobody's fishing it and I find it and it's the right habitat, maybe I'll get on them. I have seen them. I have not personally seen any large ones though.
Right.
I've seen small guys. I had one roll on a popper once. And actually that would have been incidental. I was not looking for that. I was looking for striped bass on a flat, and it was definitely a red. But no bulls that I have found.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we talked a little bit about that in that On the Water podcast. I think the idea of reestablishing bulls here is pretty far out, if that ever happens. But it's interesting. You say you've seen them. Like, I would just love that, and it's my experience in the South, because I've always been taught by different captains that, redfish don't have tremendous eyesight, and they're so voracious that basically anything you get in sort of a 2 foot by 2 foot box around their head, unless they spook, which where I've fished is fairly rare, unless it's super skinny, they're going for it. So I'm curious, Rich. Like you say, you saw them. Like, did they spook, or like? They spooked on you.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was shallow. I was in the kayak and I was standing up and poling myself with the paddle, and I could see them. They weren't tailing, but the water was only about a foot deep.
Right.
And it was. I would say I was poling, but I was more of like pushing the kayak over mud.
Right.
And I was probably saying some things I shouldn't say.
Yeah.
It was not fun. It wasn't sand. It was mud. So it was on a mud flat. I could show you exactly where it was sometime, but it was, they were definitely redfish, and there were probably 3 or 4 of them in about a foot of water, right where you would expect them to be if you were fishing North Carolina, South Carolina. And they were doing exactly what redfish do. And they looked exactly the same with the dots on the tails as the ones that I've caught down south. So, well,
and it's funny you say doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. You talk about South Jersey. I've spent so much time in the back bay down around Wildwood and Cape May, and had some incredible striper days really buried back there where it felt so redfishy. I mean, it was skinny enough where you see the striper wake, you see that fire hydrant underwater bulge wake. And every time I did it, I'm like, one of these is going to be it. Because this is the habitat, but it just never was. It was always a striper. But I just figured by luck, one of those would be. So it's cool to hear that you saw them doing redfish things in a redfish looking place. I mean, that's uplifting right there.
Yeah, then that's what drove me to even more and more time just paddling around and looking. I'm determined to find them.
Yeah,
and like you said, I don't need to catch a ton of. I've caught plenty of redfish in my life, But I'd like to see what's up. I'm trying to figure out the New Jersey redfish, because I believe that we have a resident population that's very small, and if I can see the right size and the right numbers, then that would validate that,
Sure.
And these were a little bit too big to be the right size to validate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we'll see. See,
I'm going to Florida in April, so I'm going to try and do a redfish charter, but I'm afraid, because I think once I catch one, I'm going to be so engrossed in them that I'm just not going to fish anything else up here.
No, you won't stop fishing up here, but I'd love to hear your opinion after you catch one, especially if you catch a good one. Because this came up in a show of mine too. We hold stripers in such high regard until you go down and catch a bull red, and then you compare them side to side. I mean, I think a bull red will drag a striper all over the ocean. I mean, they are in my opinion much stronger fish. That you can talk about a fish that does not give up no matter what size it is. They don't give up. They are more impressive in that regard, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it's even close, to be honest with you. It's and there's nothing wrong with striped bass in their fight. But it's not even the same class of fight. It's crazy.
Yep.
It's absolute mayhem, and they don't stop typically when you get the net out there. They should be played out, and they're not.
Nope.
They find, it's like you pull up a sheep's head and it's got that epic fight, and then you get it up to the top and it just lays on its side.
Yeah, just roll over on their side.
It's like, okay. It's like my dog when you're like, sit, and she just lays down. It's like, all right.
Yep.
So I have no problem netting those, but a red, you just kind of stick the net out and when it's run in that direction, it'll go right in for you.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing. Yeah, John Kern is saying that his brother got a 50-pound in front of Avalon 2 years ago. Now, Avalon and Stone Harbor used to be back in the 80s a spot for the bull reds to come in Hereford Inlet. And that stopped in I think the late 80s. They just kind of disappeared. The big bull reds weren't coming in.
If that's a thing, if there was an 80s run of bull reds in that area, this is the first. I don't disbelieve that, but that's never come across my radar. I've never heard whispers of an 80s thing. Everything I had read sort of shut them down by, like 1960. And that doesn't mean there weren't pockets of them, but we had a much stronger population, pre-1960. That's awesome. If there was an underground 80s run of bull reds in Stone Harbor, that's cool. I just hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, and the only reason and don't make fun of me that I'm old. I'm not that old. When I was a little kid, I would go down there and watch the guys. I couldn't reach them, but they would be casting out right down off of the point.
No way.
Yeah, and they'd be cool.
That's rad. I had no idea.
What he failed to mention is he rode his dinosaur down to the water.
I'm only all right. Well, I'm almost 50, so never mind. All right. Yeah. All right. So fine. So what other species are you going to target besides the striped bass when we're talking about saltwater?
Well, I've gotten very into the sheep's head thing, although that'll come a little bit later. What I really hope to do is spend more time in. I have been so lax the last few years, mostly because of time. There was a time in my life when I would do a dozen offshore trips a summer. I mean, I love tuna fishing so much. I love mahi fishing so much. And again, that's just primarily a time thing. I don't get offshore as much as I used to. And I'm just in a slump for a couple years now where even if I have trips lined up to get out there and do it, they will be weathered out or blown out or something. And, but traditionally, I would go from stripers when I ran my own boat out of Barnegat. Man, those were the days like you spend all summer at the, 12, 16 miles off trolling bonita and trolling false albacore before they came in and messing with the dolphin in that range. But, I've started doing a lot more fluke fishing too. I grew up doing that and then sort of got away from it. Just because I got into other things. I met as I was sort of coming up in the industry, you meet this guy, you meet that guy, suddenly you're on a bluefin trip and it's like, oh, I love bluefin, or, you're doing this. And I just sort of got away from fluke. And now with my kids, they're 8 and soon to be 5. And my son is very into fishing. And we have a little family boat down in Ocean City. Well, I mean, what's the low-hanging fruit when you got a 5-year-old that's not going to go out all day long and, decides he's tired? And it's been fun because it's forced me, similar to stock trout, I got away from that. Now my kid's all into that. Same thing with the fluke. It sort of forces your hand. It's like, all right, this might not be what you love, but now you got this little guy and some of my family members, they're not hardcore fishermen. They just want to go out and have a nice morning on the boat when we're down at the beach. So it sort of forced me to poke around fluke again. And little by little, each summer, I'm learning a little bit more and getting a little bit better at it. Now, I will say that, doing it, especially in the bay system down there, it's so crowded and pressured that catching keepers consistently is not the easiest thing in the entire world. But I'm getting good enough to where it's like we're going to catch some, and hopefully somebody gets a keeper or two.
Well, you have the game changer now, the kayak.
Yes, well,
because there are better spots that the boats can't get to than they can get to.
Rich, you are totally right, and I am going to capitalize on that. But then that's like, sorry, everybody else at the house who wants to go fishing today.
That's what a kayak's for.
Yeah, right. Yep. But I'm the only one that can run the family big boat. So it's like, if I'm not driving, it's not leaving the dock, So, but it's been a lot of fun. I'm not coming down on it. It's interesting how you sort of come around to, everything's got to be so hardcore. I do all this hardcore stuff and I'm a hardcore guy. And then you have kids and it's like, we got to take it down a few pegs. And then I come to really enjoy it. Like I look forward to bobbing around, with a killie and a gulp and, tying in the fluke with my brother-in-laws. And then we go back and, have a cocktail and had a beautiful summer day. So, I'll be doing a lot of that again this year. Look forward to that.
Yeah, I took a similar course. So before kids, it was all offshore. I mean, it was all offshore. And if the weather was bad, we were angry and went for flounder.
Yeah. Yes.
We were in southern Jersey, so they were called flounder.
Right.
So we would do that, but mostly it was bluefish, tuna, mahi, and shark, and that's what we did. And then you have kids, and I went to, for a very long time, I went to 100% night fishing. Because then I could spend the day with the kids. And as soon as they went to bed, and I always wanted it an early bedtime, as soon as they went to bed, I was out and I was hitting the bridges. I was in the kayak. I was out on the boat somewhere. And that's where I kind of started with the fluke again.
Yeah.
And I started getting serious about it. And I was like, I take the kids and I drift the same places just to get them some tight lines.
Yep.
And then at night, I'd go back in the kayak or in the boat, but I would go somewhere else where I thought the better fish were. And that's actually how I learned it. And it became more of a hunt than your typical South Jersey fluke fishing day.
Well, it's funny. And I think you guys will appreciate this. So we have this family boat, and it's really nice, and it's been a lot of fun. The whole family loves it. So a lot of times we'll sort of do a little bit of banker's hours, as I like to say. Because I'll get up at 4:00 in the morning, but not everybody in the fam's hardcore. So we have breakfast and get out a little later, and we have a wonderful day and catch a couple fluke, maybe a couple keepers, and it sort of is what it is. But then after everybody goes to bed at the beach house, I'll go back out at night, and in the morning they'll all be like, "What'd you catch?" And I got like a really nice striper, and it's like, well, why aren't we catching that on the boat? I'm like, because I can't do that with this. You know what I mean? Like it's
too hard.
It's so hard to convey that like I'm sliding down this slope and getting in here at exactly this tide to stand right here, and I know this is going to happen, and like. It's a beautiful boat, but it's 24-footer. You guys know that, if you're stepping up from a kayak, if you really want to get after stuff down in South Jersey, you sort of want a beater, like a skiff that you don't mind if it rubs up against the bridge or you beach it in the side or you make some oyster stew coming through a cut that's too shallow. We have this really nice boat, so it's limiting. So it's always like I catch this flack. It's like, well, how come you go out alone at night and you catch that? I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I can't replicate that very easily, at 10:00 in the morning on a Saturday in June,
with the jet skis going by.
Correct.
It's funny you mentioned that. So our family boat was the 24-foot Grady White. And then I ended up getting the Carolina skiff, and it rubbed up against bridges. It rubbed up against pilings. There are a lot of trenches that I put through the flats trying to get through the oyster, the dead oysters.
If you want to be efficient down there and really get after some fish, your boat has to be a tool for a job that you are willing to scratch and dent to get there. Well,
it's the same with the kayaks. And Rich, I've even told you, Rich, you were like padding your kayak and everything else. I'm like, dude, it's a plastic boat. Like
it is. But
we're gonna bang them up. We're gonna beat them up. They're consumables.
I was looking at mine today. Ed. I gave it a good wash and everything, and got it in the garage before the storm. And I was looking at it. I'm like, this thing looks like it's 7 or 8 years old, and I got it during COVID, so it's not that old,
right?
And I'm like, oh my gosh! Thank God I put stuff on it, because I rub against so many bridges and so many pilings, and I just drag it all over, the bars and up ramps. So I do put keel guards on it. Thank God, because this thing should have a hole in it.
Yeah.
If I didn't.
Yeah.
That's what they're made for. My opinion since day one is they're a tool. They're a tool to get us to where we need to go. And if they get beat up, they get beat up.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Ed's a mechanic, so you take care of your tools?
I do.
You throw them on the shop floor.
No, I take care of my tools, but they all have lifetime warranties, kind of like the old town halls. So.
Yeah.
All right. We'll talk about that. So we all have big waters, by the way. So
nice.
We're all on the same platform there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. So I'm looking at this. We are actually we're up at the hour. So this happens quite often, where we could probably talk for 3 hours before anybody notices that we're up against the hour, but we do have a time limit on these. So we're going to have to start to wrap it up. Joe, is there anything? Well, first of all, before you go, I want to make sure that you can get out everywhere that people can find you. I think that's important. So why don't we do that to start?
Sure. So Instagram is at Joe Cermele 138, and the Cut and Retie podcast is pretty much on any platform you want it to be on. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you will find it there.
Awesome. And it finally got picked up by Google?
Yes. I think they lagged behind. I learned that some take longer than others to get you uploaded, but I believe it is on Google now. There's always one. There's always one that's somehow missing, and I'm like, dude, like 5 people listen to it there. But okay, I'll make sure it gets there. But it's on all the majors. So
awesome. All right, Ed, did you have anything you wanted to add in?
Yeah, I had to hit on James Flynn. He asked if I'd clean my truck, and the answer is no.
My truck. We'll talk about my truck. It's reprehensible.
It's not even going there.
It's just I left a bunch of stuff in there from yesterday. So nets, and you know how it is.
Yep.
You get 4 hours of sleep because of daylight savings time. You get down there and you fish. It's a terrible day on the water. Actually, it was a fun day on the water, so I won't say it was terrible. Difficult day. And then you drive 2.5 hours to get home. It's like, I'm done.
Yep.
I'm done. So I just left the kayak on there.
Move closer.
I did that recently with a pair of winter fingerless gloves that I held pike with. You know what I mean? Like I had held pike and unhooked pike. Forgot about those for a couple days. That wasn't good.
No, that's never good.
Nope.
It sounds like my truck.
Yeah.
I always find stuff like that.
Nasty.
So we're good now. All right. So actually, Joe, if you could hold on after we sign out, I just want to let everybody know we're going to be back next week. We're going to have on with us a captain to talk about, again, spring fishing, but we're going to focus on the upper Chesapeake. So we're going to have Captain Kayla Hale on from River Queen Charters and or Guide Service, and she's going to go through all of that. So we're talking everything from pan fishing in the rivers all the way out to the striped bass, which is what is going to be the big focus. Maybe we'll even get her to talk about what the heck is open, what the heck is closed, what can you use and what can't you use, i.e. eels. I don't even know if she's going to want to get into that because it's so confusing when you get to Maryland. But Captain Kayla is going to be on with us next week. So everybody, I want to thank everyone for coming in this week. Really appreciate it. Joe, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
This was awesome. We'll be back next week. So guys, till next week, until next episode, get out there, get on the water, and get some tight lines.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fishing in our soul.